Exposed, 7 haunting rules of a fire lookout in British Columbia that will chill you to the bone. Sarah stood in her solitary tower, the vast expanse of British Columbia's towering trees stretching endlessly before her. They whispered secrets, their rustling leaves weaving a melody that became a dangerous lullaby. It was a world far from her small Midwestern town, where the horizon lay flat and predictable. Here, shadows loomed like hungry ghosts alongside wind-chilled whispers that often sent shivers down her spine. What had felt like a serene escape now felt like a tightrope walk over an abyss. Every day, Sarah followed her rules, instincts drummed into her by the lore of the land and the whispers of the old locals. "Do not wander after dark," they said. "Trust your eyes, not your mind. The forest holds secrets that can drive a person mad, and never venture too close to the old trees beneath which the cursed path lies." For weeks alone had transformed her from a woman seeking solitude into a fragile creature, wrestling with doubt and terror. Her binoculars felt heavier every time she raised them to the horizon, troubled visions of loneliness darkening her perspective. Then came the moment of unease that would haunt her. As the sun dipped low, the whispering winds heightened, she felt it an ominous tug at her reality. Shapes flickered at the edges of her vision, elusive as smoke. As she tried to shake it off, her attention was drawn to the edge of the forest, drawn to shadows swaying just out of reach, teasing her with what might lie beyond. Ominous but compelling, the whispers seemed to share words she couldn't grasp, an ancestral call she was born to chase, yet feared wholeheartedly. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Nights melted into mornings, and soon the anxiety became unbearable. Ghostly legends surfaced amongst the gloom, the whispered tales of a spirit that protected ancient forests and carried grave warnings, an entity said to guard a mystery that intertwined Sarah's family history with the land she now watched. As she battled the shadowy thoughts forming within, her pulse raced, her heart thundering like the beats of a forgotten drum echoing through the trees. Then one evening, just as dusk cloaked the landscape in velvet darkness, everything spiraled. A frantic call shattered her isolation. "Sarah! I'm lost." It was Jake, her estranged brother. His voice trembled, sharp with fear, and suddenly the familiar fields of their childhood felt worlds away. Sarah's determination sparked within, fueled by memory, the sun-kissed days of endless adventures and unbroken bonds. She could hear the forest sigh around her, ready to swallow her hopes alongside her brother, but, as she prepared to leave the tower, doubt gnawed at her. Was it only the forest that threatened him, or was it the ancient being waiting to entrap its next soul? With tension thick in the air and the weight of her choices pressing down, her thoughts turned dark. What lay in the heart of those woods? Would Sarah find her brother, or would they both be consumed by the insatiable hunger lurking just beyond the treeline? She stood at the brink, breathless, feeling the pulse of the forest, unaware of the twist her fate awaited, one that could alter the stories they held dear. The wind howled through the trees, a chilling reminder of the darkness ahead. Sarah took a deep breath, her hand trembling around the flashlight she swung loosely by her side. She hadn't ventured into the woods at night since she first arrived, but panic clenched her gut, driving her forward. Every step deeper into the underbrush felt like a misstep in a fragile dance with fate. Branches reached out like skeletal fingers, grasping at her, as she called out, "Jake! Can you hear me?" It felt futile, the sound swallowed by the dense foliage. The shadows loomed, shifting and snaking, painting grotesque shapes against her wavering beam of light. With each small sound, the skitter of a creature in the leaves, the rustling of unseen footsteps, fear twisted tighter around her heart. "Sarah! I'm here." The whisper, a mere fragment, drifted through the air, a haunting echo of her brother's voice. It was close, but also impossibly far away. She strained to hone in on it, letting her instincts guide her even as every instinct warned her to turn back. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." She hurried onward, her breath quickening. The shadows shifted unnaturally around her, for a moment revealing a clearing bathed in an ethereal glow of moonlight. It felt wrong, a stillness that screamed of something ever watchful. Just past the edge of the clearing, she caught a glimpse of a figure. It took her breath, a feeling of despair that knotted painfully in her chest. "Jake?" She called again, desperation tinging her voice. The woods responded with an unsettling silence, a heaviness gathering as her heart thumped erratically. The ground beneath her feet felt alive, a pulse rippling through the soil as if the forest was aware, breathing, watching. Then, a sharp crack echoed behind her. She spun around, her pulse racing and fear cascading down her spine. There it was again, a rustle, a low, guttural sound that sent every hair on her body standing. Panic rose anew, urging her to run, yet her feet felt rooted to the ground, caught in a web of dread. A figure emerged from the dense thicket, but it was not Jake. The shape was distorted, features blurred, eyes reflecting the dim light as though they glowed with an otherworldly fire. A chill wrapped around Sarah like icy fingers. It was more than an ethereal presence, it radiated foreboding, a sinister weight that threatened to drown her in despair. "Who are you?" she demanded, gripping the flashlight tighter, its beam wavering against the escalating darkness, trembling with her uncertainty. The shadows whispered again, a cacophony of voices skimming the edge of her sanity, a warning, a curse. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face twisted in anguish, eyes like deep wells inviting her to dive in. Instead, she stumbled back, her mind racing, battling the flood of emotions cascading through her. "I'm looking for my brother," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Your blood ties you to this land," the figure spoke, voice in eerie harmony infused with sadness. "You must choose, save your brother, or seal your own fate." A visceral panic gripped Sarah, leaving her gasping. The weight of her family's dark legacy pressed down on her, curling fingers of dread around her throat. "What do you mean?" she pleaded, not just for clarity but for reassurance that hope still remained. The figure's laughter rang through the night, chilling her to the bone. "The forest reveals its truths, but within its depths lie horrors you're not prepared to face." The whispering treetops seemed to join in, a rustling cacophony surrounding her, urging her to decide. Sarah's heart raced as dread seeped deeper, leaving her hands cold and unsteady. She was at a precipice, her brother's fate intertwined with the unknown lurking in the shadows before her. "Choose wisely." The haunting figure drifted back into the shadows, swallowed whole, and for a moment, the world grew still. Would she pursue her brother, risking everything, or retreat to the tower in search of safety, leaving him lost to whatever dwelled in the depths of the forest? The night held its breath, waiting for her answer and for the choices that would reverberate through her family's bloodline. "Sarah!" The urgent whisper broke through her reverie, echoing once more. There it was again, but was it truly him? She stood frozen, torn between loyalty and survival, facing the unknown. She closed her eyes, heart pounding, taking a step forward into the desolate darkness, the forest holding its breath in anticipation. What awaited her in the shadows? Would she emerge with her brother, or would the forest claim them both forever? The night felt thick, a living thing that surrounded Sarah, pressing against her ears. The whispering voice of her brother was disembodied now, fading into the distance, but it pulled at her, a lifeline tangled in fear. Every nerve in her body flared with tension, and she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching her from within the dark tangle of trees. "Jake!" she shouted again, forcing a desperate tremor into her voice, a plea that echoed into the void. But the silence that followed felt suffocating, even insatiable, like the woods themselves were consuming her words. She tightened her grip on the flashlight, the beam shaky but unwavering as she pushed forward into the shadows. The trees pressed closely together, their gnarled branches clawing at her, scratching against her skin as she brushed past. Every snapped twig felt like a warning, every rustle whispering her name, luring her deeper into the dark heart of the forest. Suddenly, she heard the voice again, clearer this time, urgent and close. "Sarah, please, help me." Her stomach twisted. "I'm coming," she called back, her heart pounding. The teasing laughter of the figure from earlier replayed in her mind, a twisted echo of mocking amusement. A shudder ran through her, filling her with dread. What did that thing mean? She muttered to herself, chewing on the thought as the trees closed in tighter. The scenario morphed in her mind. What if she was running towards something dark and terrible? What if her brother was already? Stopping abruptly, she steadied her breath, illuminating the path ahead. The flashlight flickered for a moment, dimming as if responding to her trepidation. Shadows latched onto her, seeking to hide any fragment of light she tried to maintain. She felt small, exposed, vulnerable against whatever horrors sought to claim her. When the whispers returned, so low they could fade into the breeze. "Leave, it's too late." The collective voices merged and flowed, a chorus of warning that chilled her to the bone. She shook her head, struggling to keep the fears at bay. "No. You don't know me," she shouted, grounding herself as she stepped forward into the gathering gloom. "Leave now." The voice simmered, resonating within her skull, heavy like a tolling bell. But then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a struggle, gasping breaths mingling with muffled cries. Her instincts kicked in, pushing her forward. There was no retreat. Not now. She had come too far. "Jake!" she shouted again, her voice raw from fear, desperation clawing at her throat. She stumbled through a thicket, not caring if her arms stung from the brambles. She could hear him, the panic tightening within his plea. A primal scream erupted from the depths of the forest, echoing in a hellish howl. It pierced the silence, freezing her mid-step. Footsteps raced toward her, pounding the ground like a stampede. "Sarah!" The cry was frantic and filled with terror. It moved through her, a jolt of sharp, electrifying fear. The flashlight pulsed a weak glow, struggling against the consuming darkness. She was on the verge of making her choice when a flash of movement caught her eye. There, just outside the beam's reach, shadows danced and twisted, almost forming a figure. The pulse quickened in her chest. "Jake?" she cried again, hope mingling with dread. But the shadows shifted, claiming their space once more. As she stepped closer, the ground suddenly shifted beneath her, and her foot slipped, sending her tumbling forward into an unseen chasm. With a grip of instinct, she swung the flashlight wildly, but all light vanished, plunging her into an abyss. Fingers brushed against her own in the darkness, ice-cold and clammy. Panic surged as she gasped for air, the shadows closing in tighter. "Sarah, we must run." Her brother's voice tugged her to awareness as she suddenly felt herself pulled free, yanked back into the starlit realm. She crashed into something solid, gasping. What was that? She breathed, struggling to catch her breath, but the cold chill continued to emanate from the woods, creeping along her spine. The shadows morphed again, and once more came the figure, no longer a mirage but a menacing presence creeping closer. "Your choice looms larger than you know," it hissed, eyes glowing like dying embers, heart racing. Sarah shot a glance at Jake. Could she trust him? Could she risk everything on the hope of escape? Was this really a choice at all, or just a path leading further into darkness? Behind her, the shadows lengthened, a waiting hunger in the air. The weight of fate pressed on her, leaving her with one horrifying realization: the forest was alive, not just watching, but waiting. But what was its true intent? The answer felt just out of reach, an enigma drawing her closer to its unfathomable pull. "Tread lightly, Sarah," whispered the dark voice, "for now, the choice is yours." Could she navigate the thin line between rescue and ruin? Would she unveil the forest's secrets, or would it pull her into darkness forever? The air drank in her fear, thick and suffocating, wrapping around Sarah like the shadowed limbs of the trees. As her heart thudded louder in her chest, her mind raced through the fog of confusion and dread. She took a step back, her breath hitching as she faced the figure looming just beyond the light's reach. "Stay back!" she yelled, the command wobbling on her lips. The entity paused, shadows swirling around it like dark smoke. "You think you can escape?" it taunted, voice a haunting melody laced with malice. Each word seeped through her like poison, igniting her fight-or-flight instinct. "Jake!" she yelled, hoping he could hear her above the roaring chaos in her mind. But just as she turned, searching for him in the darkness, an icy gust whipped through the trees, pushing her back. The light flickered again, sputtering ominously. "Sarah! Over here!" Jake's voice cracked through the night, heralding a rush of hope amidst the creeping despair. "Where?" she called desperately, feeling her way back toward the sound. "Follow my voice. I'm right here. Please." Panic strummed through her veins. She lunged forward, barreling through the dense underbrush, the flashlight beam dragging behind her like a wounded companion. The forest seemed to conspire against her, raw branches snatching her clothes as if trying to claim her for itself. The whispers built in a crescendo, growing louder, more insistent words swirling in a tempest of dread. "Turn back, Sarah. It's too late for him." "No." She gritted her teeth, determination roaring in her chest. She would not surrender him. The cry pierced her resolve, an anguished plea that sent her heart plummeting. "Help me, please." But the voice was fading. She was losing him, losing the very tether that had pulled her into this living nightmare. Suddenly, she broke free of the thicket and skidded onto a small clearing. The moon bathed the area in silver, offering a fleeting glimpse of safety. "Jake!" A figure emerged from the shadows. She rushed towards it, relief flooding her senses until she realized it wasn't Jake at all. This one wore a twisted smile that sent chills spiraling down her spine. "You are so close," it murmured, tilting its head unnaturally, shadows dancing like flames around it. "Get away from me!" she shouted, stumbling backward as her heart raced. But behind that taunting figure, she felt it, the tug of Jake's voice, a glimmer of hope. "Sarah! I'm just ahead." The illusion pulled at her, trying to lure her in. Just beyond it, she caught a glimpse of movement, something shifting in the woods, perhaps another illusion or a reality she couldn't yet understand. Taking a deep breath, she turned her back on the figure weaving lies in the moonlight. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Shadows crept up on her heels, vying for her attention, desperate to pull her into their murky depths. She sprinted into the darkness, the flashlight illuminating just enough to keep her aim steady, focusing solely on Jake's cry. "Keep calling," she thundered, sprinting faster, pooling all her energy into finding him. His voice flared again, desperate and raw. "I'm here, I see you." With every ounce of strength behind her, she zigzagged through the loom of trees. But then she felt it, a sharp tug, a whirl of cold fingers wrapping around her ankle, pulling her down. She screamed, flailing instinctively, kicking at the unseen force dragging her deeper into the night. "Sarah!" Jake's voice became frantic, drowning in a chorus of disembodied whispers. "Jake, help!" Panic surged, drowning her resolve. But as she thrashed, she glimpsed the forest opening up ahead, where moonlight poured in like a beacon of hope, illuminating a path framed by the gathering shadows. "Look! Follow my light!" She strained, mustering every ounce of strength left within her. That flicker of light felt like a bridge between desperation and salvation. She fought against the pull, scrabbling closer and closer to that sliver of safety. But the darkness roared in defiance around her, hungry for her despair. Would she reach Jake before the shadows claimed her, or would she be lost within the forest's terrifying embrace? Another primal scream echoed in the night, slicing through the tension, growing closer with every heartbeat. "Sarah!" She was almost there, almost free, but the whispers coalesced into a chilling proclamation. "It will cost you." And just as she reached into the light, the ground beneath her rumbled ominously, shaking her to the core. What price would she pay, and who would be the final victim in this nightmare, the moment hung delicately in the air, trailing into uncertainty. The ground trembled like a living beast, pulling at her more fiercely as the light flickered like a dying ember. Sarah's heart raced, pounding almost painfully in her chest. Shadows twisted together, creating grotesque forms that darted at the edges of her vision. She could barely think, let alone weigh the price the darkness demanded of her. "Jake!" She screamed one last time, desperately clawing at the dirt, trying to drag herself free of whatever unseen force held her captive. A surge of pain shot through her leg as the grip tightened, and she cried out, feeling that icy grip gnaw at her will to fight. "Don't let it take me, please. I can't lose you too." The forest echoed her anguish, absorbing her words and returning them to her in mocking whispers. "Sarah. I'm here. I want to let go." His voice ignited a flicker of determination that defied the shadows and gave her strength. But the darkness around her surged, desperate to keep her away from the sliver of light that promised safety. With renewed vigor, she rolled onto her back, fighting against the cold and clawing hands of the night. She could just make out Jake through the trees, a blur against the bright moon, his silhouette straining to break through the shadows in a conflict of his own. "Stay focused, Sarah. Don't give in." His words were her lifeline. She gritted her teeth and thrust herself forward, dragging the weight of fear and uncertainty behind her. The light pulsed ahead, drawing her toward it like a moth to a flame. The twisted figure that had haunted her moments before stepped closer, dark laughter spilling from its lips. "You won't escape that easily. Nothing comes without sacrifice," its voice hissed, seeping into her mind with a sickening sweetness. Just beyond the silhouette, shadows reached out, clawing for her limbs, trying to snatch her back into the abyss. She had to tear herself free. Had to trust the light even if part of her screamed that light rarely comes without its own shadows. "Jake!" Pure desperation squeezed her throat. "Just a little more," he urged, his voice flickering like a dying flame. Focusing on his words, Sarah lunged again towards the light, her raw scream determination cutting through the cacophony of whispers. She could almost feel Jake's fingertips grazing the back of her neck, keeping her tethered to him through the impending chaos. With one mighty push, she tore her leg free and stumbled into the clearing, where moonlight cascaded down, cleansing the dread that clung to her, but the sound of laughter erupted from behind her, dark and triumphant, echoing over the rustling leaves. The twisted figure melted back into the shadows, leaving its wicked promise hanging in the air. "You think you're safe? You do not know what you have awakened." Sarah's stomach dropped, realizing that whatever she evaded didn't simply vanish. The trees shivered around her, alive and aware. "Jake!" she cried, her eyes desperately scanning for his figure. "I'm over here. Please." His voice trembled, drawing her toward a grove of silver-bark trees on the edge of the clearing. She took cautious steps forward, heart pounding with each breath. But the whispers returned, swirling like a storm around her, mercilessly directing her uncertainty. They echoed in her mind, drowning out Jake's call. "You should have listened, you should have turned back," they taunted. Her breath quickened, and as she looked back toward Jake, a blinding flash flared from behind him. An ominous glow illuminated the surrounding trees, painting dark, foreboding shapes across the forest. "Sarah!" he shouted again, frantically waving his arms. But she hesitated. The chilling beckoning of the shadows tugged at her heart, coaxing doubts. Who was truly in danger? As she took a step closer to him, hesitation rooted her to the spot. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the silence thick and heavy. In that moment of uncertainty, she felt it, the ground rumbling beneath her feet again. A low growl echoed in the distance, deep and resonating, a promise of chaos and horror. She could feel the air shift as if the trees were settling in for a violent storm. What had she unleashed? The realization washed over her like ice water. She had to choose, trust in Jake or succumb to the shadows whispering her name. A fierce wind rose, pulling her hair and snapping branches. She closed her eyes, torn between light and dark, past and future. Sarah. Would she answer his call, or would she let the forest claim her in its haunting stillness? A single, chilling laugh split the air once more. You will not be the same when you return, and just like that, the light dimmed, her heart racing with fear of what lay ahead. In the shifting shadows, the true cost of the darkness loomed, and the forest promised to reveal its long-buried secrets. The world tilted as Sarah stood frozen, her heart thundering like a drum against the night. The shadows pulsed, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket, each whisper tightening the grip on her thoughts. Jake's frantic cries faded into the background as the darkness climbed higher, threatening to swallow everything whole. Every fiber of her being screamed to run, but her feet remained planted in fear. "Jake, I can't," she gasped, choking on the words as pulsating shapes swirled in front of her, distorting her reality. It felt as though gravity itself twisted around her, pulling her in multiple directions at once. The glowing light behind Jake flickered again, reminding her of the hope she clung to, a beacon in a world suddenly devoured by nightmares. "Please, Sarah. It's you I'm here for." His voice cut through the haze, sending spikes of urgency and fear through her. But the shadows slithered forth, hugging her tighter, binding her will. "You don't know what he truly is," they cooed, their echoes wrapping around her like a serpent. "He cannot save you. Not from this. Shut up," she yelled, ripping her gaze away from the malevolent forms and locking her eyes on the man who mattered. Jake's silhouette was a lifeline she couldn't let drown. Summoning every ounce of strength, she pushed her feet forward, one stumbling step at a time, feeling the oppressive force clawing at her, biting deeply. "I'm coming," she shouted, her voice ringing out against the darkness. As she moved closer, the shadows shrieked, a cacophony of torment that threatened to drown her out. Dense fog rolled in, thick as molasses, curling around her ankles, reaching towards her waist. She fought through it, heart bursting with every ounce of hope she dared to cling to. With each step, she felt the ground beneath her shift and quiver, as if the earth itself was a live wire, buzzing with unspeakable energy. "We're almost there. Don't stop," Jake urged, desperation creeping in. A sudden blast of wind threw her against a tree, the silver bark pressing against her back like icy fingers. Her breath caught in her throat as she gasped against the cold touch. Screams etched from the twisted forms around her, vibrant in their malevolence. "You think he can save you? Just one more step, and you'll see." The earth roared with rage as roots snaked around her ankles, pulling her down, closer to the ground, closer to the darkness. "No!" she cried, fighting against the grip and tearing her leg free. She flung herself forward, eyes locked onto Jake's. But the glow behind him dimmed, a flicker as darkness engulfed the last of the light. "Jake!" Her scream hung in the air, laced with panic and desperation. He was right there. If only she could reach him, if only she could trust him. In her mind, a memory surged, a fleeting moment between laughter shared and dreams whispered under moonlit skies. With renewed resolve, she steadied herself against the tree, pressing through the feelings of doubt and despair. "I am not afraid," she shouted defiantly to the shadows, as the ground shook again, this time threatening to crack wide open. Suddenly, she felt at the sharpness of the air switching status, a breath held in hesitation. Was the forest anticipating her? Was it waiting for her to take that final plunge? A rumble followed, deeper this time, echoing with ancient promises of terror. "Sarah!" Jake's voice reverberated in the dark, pulling her closer with chords of longing and intensity. In a moment, the whispers escalated into chaos, a thunderous roar urging her deeper into the fray. "Embrace the darkness. It is where you belong." With one knowing glance passed between them, she mustered the last of her strength and sprinted towards him as the shadows lunged, desperate to keep her from reaching the light she so desperately craved. Just as their fingers brushed, a violent gust ripped through, scattering leaves and branches like debris. She felt a wrenching pull, the trees heaving as though alive. "Hold on!" Jake shouted, his hand tightening around hers as the darkness around them stirred violently, leaving them teetering on the edge of the unknown. But as she felt the warmth of his grip, the darkness beckoned her with promises of knowledge, with whispers of power that enticed her to look back. The tendrils of shadow wrapped around her waist once more, their chilling grasp promising secrets too tempting to resist. In that moment, Sarah had to choose: let go of everything she once believed in or plunge headfirst into the heart of the shadows, risking everything for a deeper truth. And as the shadows tightened their grip, she took a deep breath, ready to uncover the chilling ambition of the forest's dark heart. Would the answers she uncovered be worth the sacrifice? The ground heaved ominously, their fate hanging in the balance as they were consumed by darkness. Their fingers barely touched when an icy surge shot through Sarah, shattering her thoughts. The world around them exploded into chaos, the shadows spiraling, howling as if in rage. Don't let go. Jake's eyes burned with intensity, his grip a warm anchor in the storm. But darkness roared around them, shadowy tendrils whispering sweet lies about power, knowledge, freedom. Why fight? This is your destiny, it taunted, curling greedily around Sarah, tightening like a vice. Every breath she took was a battle, the intoxicating promise of the shadows mixed with the fierce reality of Jake's presence. Stand with me, he shouted, his voice cutting through the suffocating shadows. Just as she began to pull away, a flurry of images invaded her mind, flashes of her childhood, her mother's laughter, the warmth of summers at the lake, and the bitterness when she had lost it all. With each memory, she felt something deep within her stir, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. No! She cried, shaking her head furiously. I refuse. With each heartbeat, light flared around them, seeping from the cracks of her soul. The shadows shrieked in retaliation, sensing her resolve building like a tidal wave. Sarah focused on Jake, the light shimmering behind him, a promise of safety amid the malevolence. Together, Sarah. Count on me. He implored, his voice threading through the dark chaos. In a surge of pure defiance, she yanked her breath in sharply, those fading memories merging with the singular moment of now. She could feel the chill of shadows battling against her fire. Gathering herself, she roared back at the uproar. You can't take me. The ground beneath them bucked violently. The whispering shadows hesitated, a split second of uncertainty, and that was all Sarah needed. With a newfound fury, she leaned into Jake, their strength intertwining, wrestling the darkness that threatened to envelop them. I choose light. She yelled as she surged forward, plowing through the swirling shadows that reached for her. The pressure on her chest lifted, and the world around them shimmered, blurring the line between torment and clarity. The air thickened as they pressed deeper, pulsating with life and fear, uncertainty. Shadows writhed, clawing at their ankles, trying to yank them back, but with each step, the malevolent entities hissed in pain. Jake's hand practically burned against hers, feeding her strength, urging her onward. Just when Sarah thought they would break free, a giant figure emerged from the shadows, towering and cloaked, its eyes shimmering like dying embers. Foolish girl, it spat, a voice like thunder trapped inside a jar. What you seek lies in darkness. Let it consume you. But the fog of uncertainty that had racked her mind shattered. No, she breathed, her heart racing. You're wrong. And just like that, an ember ignited deep within her, blossoming into a fierce glow that chased away the encroaching tendrils. The dark figure winced, stepping back, eyes wide with sudden fear as sunlight broke through the canopy above them, an illumination that twisted through the shadows, creating a stark contrast. Together! Sarah shouted, fixing her gaze on Jake's filled with determination. Both of them rushed towards the growing light, each step like a drumbeat of defiance. The shadows clawed and screamed with rage, but it didn't matter. As they emerged from the canopy, the darkness slashed behind them, hissing, as if the forest itself was shedding its skin. But the light that enveloped them didn't feel like a warm embrace, it felt like a challenge, pulsating with energy, ready to reveal deeper truths that could tear them apart again. And in that fragile moment, as they stood breathless at the edge of some incomprehensible threshold, a voice whispered through the leaves. You think you've escaped, but the real nightmare is just beginning. What lay ahead seemed as ominous as what they had fled from, and suddenly, a sense of dread washed over Sarah. They hadn't won. It felt more like transforming the battleground. "Jake, what now?" she whispered, her voice trembling as the humming energy crackled around them. He didn't answer, dread shadowing his features as they stood on the brink of a reality that promised both revelation and ruin. The ground beneath them pulsed with unspoken warnings, and Sarah could sense that a choice one of them would soon shatter the fragile peace they had found. Was this the beginning of their salvation, or the doorway to a darkness that awaited them? The ground trembled, vibrating beneath them like a living creature. A low, menacing growl filled the air, a resonance that rattled Sarah's very bones. She and Jake stood frozen, hearts pounding, the aftermath of their escape still thick in the air like smoke. Then, without a word, the surroundings started to shift. Trees that had once stood tall now twisted, their branches reaching out like desperate hands, clawing at the sky. Shadows darted beneath the underbrush, shapes flickering and vanishing, taunting them with fragments of their imagination. "What are we doing?" Jake's voice trembled as he glanced around, a mixture of fear and confusion etched on his face. Sarah felt the familiar, clammy fingers of fear closing around her throat. "We need to keep moving. Whatever that voice is, it knows we're here." But every step felt heavier than the last. The light around them, once bright and liberating, began to dim, the ground beneath them pulsing with a sinister energy that didn't seem to fade. As they moved into a clearing, the treetops parted to reveal an ancient stone altar at its center. It was draped in vines and moss, the kind of eerie stillness nearly suffocating. A chilling sense of purpose hung over it, like the weight of 1,000 eyes watching, waiting. "Sarah," Jake murmured, his voice low but urgent. In the lingering light, the shadows took on new shapes, twisted faces contorted with rage and sorrow. "We shouldn't be here." Before she could respond, the air thickened, charged with an electric tension that set every hair on her body on end. The chilling whisper from before returned, now louder, echoing through the clearing. "You dare to defy your destined path? You are merely pawns." A rush of adrenaline coursed through Sarah as she fought the urge to fall back, to flee. "No!" she shouted into the darkening air, as if her defiance might pierce through the chaos. "We aren't pawns. We're making our own choices." The shadows recoiled, as if her words had struck a blow. Yet within that recoil came a stirring, a darkness swelling, coiling tighter, wrapping around her and Jake like a noose. The altar thrummed with life, pulsing to the rhythm of their unease. "What if?" Jake hesitated, looking at her with a mix of worry and courage. "What if we have to confront this head-on? What if it's the only way?" The weight of his suggestion hung between them. Sarah's heart raced. She could already feel the walls of her resolve cracking, trembling under the pressure of the dark whispers flooding her mind. "If we do this," she said slowly, her breath hitching, "there's no turning back." "I know." His eyes flickered, steely in the fading light. "But we need to know what we're up against." As they approached the altar, every step was a silent surrender, a choice made in the shadow of uncertainty. The air crackled, sparking with potential light and dark coiling, ready to erupt, and they confronted whatever awaited them. The moment their hands plunged onto the ancient stone's cold surface, a deafening roar erupted from the shadows, funneling into a cacophony of chaotic energy. Chains snapped around their very souls, and images began to whirl near the altar, snippets of nightmares, fearsome monsters, and faces twisted in agony. A voice howled like a tortured wind, "You cannot escape the tether of fate. It is time to embrace the darkness." And in that fractured moment of tension, Sarah felt something shift within her. "Embrace?" she exclaimed, her heart thumping like a rally drum in her chest. "We're not here to embrace anything." Suddenly, the ground shook violently, rocks splintering as the shadows roared louder, drowning her voice. In that chaos, a brimming light surged through her and Jake, a fierce glow that shattered the whispers like glass, but as the shadows attacked in a last-ditch effort, a blinding flash erupted, and Sarah felt herself being pulled through the darkness, caught in a battle of pure will and fate that neither of them could have predicted. As everything around them warped, tendrils of darkness reaching and grasping, stalling their retreat. One haunting thought remained: they weren't just fighting for their lives, but for the very fabric of their existence. And then, with a final gasp, the ground beneath them gave way, plunging them into unknown depths, a void that promised both terror and truth. What horrors awaited them in the shadows below? The darkness engulfed them like a bitter fog, cold and unyielding. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she tumbled through the void, the sensation of weightlessness spinning her thoughts into chaos. Beside her, Jake's panicked scream pierced the silence, but before she could respond, they landed with a hard thud, the impact jarring her mind momentarily. Gasping for air, Sarah blinked against the oppressive darkness. She pushed herself up, her palms pressing into cold, rough ground that felt alive. Shadows danced in her peripheral vision, flickering and darting away whenever she turned to look. "Jake!" she shouted, her voice trembling as it echoed strangely in the heavy air. He groaned, rising beside her. "What just happened?" "I don't know. It felt like we were." She frowned, searching the dim surroundings for clues. "Falling. They're coming." His voice was tight with urgency, eyes wide with fear as he scanned the space around them. The oppressive silence was palpable, broken only by the distant rumble of something ominous echoing within the depths. Before Sarah could respond, a group of shadowy figures began to materialize before them. They moved like smoke leaking from a fire, twisted forms whispering in a language she couldn't comprehend. Their faces shifted, tormented, angry, lost. Each wisp of darkness flickered with malevolence. "What is this place?" she whispered, her skin prickling with dread. "Not a place," Jake gasped, stepping back, "a prison." The shadows hissed, a sound like broken glass scraping against stone. "You have entered the realm of despair," one figure moaned, its voice echoing not just through the air but within her very bones. "You are tethered here, bound by choice and fate." The implications twisted in Sarah's gut, coiling tighter and tighter until it felt like she might burst. "No. We can't be trapped." "You made a choice," another figure hissed, flaring an arm toward the altar from which they had fallen, to confront what was meant to be avoided. "And now your souls belong to the abyss." "No!" she screamed, rising to her feet as adrenaline surged through her. The shadows seemed to recoil from her voice, shifting uneasily. "We refuse to accept this." Jake grabbed her hand and pulled her slightly behind him. "What do we do? If we don't play along, will they? What if we confront them?" Sarah cut in, a spark lighting within her. "If we're bound by choice, then we can choose to fight." He hesitated but then nodded, determination gleaming in his eyes. "Okay. Together." With their hands clasped tightly, they called forth the light that had flared before and vanished with them into darkness. It climbed through their fingertips, igniting like a match dropped into gasoline. "Stop!" The shadows thrashed, drawn to the burgeoning light like moths to a flame. The air crackled with energy as Sarah and Jake stood firm, channeling their shared strength. Boldness surged within her, shaking off doubt as she shouted, "We will not be your pawns." The shadows recoiled in a whirlwind of rage and confusion. The ground trembled, tremors spilling outward as the light began to push against the darkness surrounding them. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the air, drowning out all reason. "You can't escape the truth." Intense agony radiated from the shadows, conjuring phantoms of their worst fears, their loved ones twisted, consumed by darkness. Jake faltered. "Sarah, I can't." "Jake. Focus," she yelled, channeling every ounce of resolve she had left. "Remember why we came here." But their courage felt fragile, wavering as the shadows closed in. Twisted faces formed in the gathering gloom, taunting them with old pains and buried sorrows. Sarah steeled herself, unsure how much longer they could withstand the pressure. Just then, a flicker of hope sparkled in the corner of her vision. A strange light pulsed beyond the shadows. There. We need to get to that light. It might be our way out. In that moment, amidst chaos, uncertainty, and despair, Sarah felt a surge deep within her spirit, urging her forward. Together. She shouted again, and as she broke into a run, she could only hope Jake would follow. But with each step they took, the shadows intensified, the ground pulsing like a live wire beneath them. Would they reach that light before it was too late? What awaited them beyond the darkness? The oppressive darkness writhed around them as Sarah and Jake sprinted toward the shimmering light, their hearts pounding in unison. A whirlwind of swirling shadows surged behind them, desperate to reclaim the souls that dared to defy its clutches. She could feel an icy presence creeping up her back, but she didn't dare to turn around. With every ounce of strength they had, they pushed forward, refusing to be ensnared by the past. Keep going. We're almost there. Jake's voice rang out, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos, and it spurred her on. The light pulsed ahead like a heartbeat, inviting but uncertain. She fought against the tangible fear each whispering shadow conjured, grasping onto her unyielding resolve. Suddenly, the ground shook violently beneath their feet, fraying the thin strand of their courage. Sarah stumbled, but Jake's steady grip anchored her. They surged ahead, determination blazing like a wildfire in her veins. Do you see it? She shouted, breathless. Just a bit further. The luminous light filled her senses, warmth spreading through her chest. She could feel the dark tendrils lashing out behind them, clawing at the very essence of their souls. With each step, they urged her to turn back, to surrender to the despair that loomed so close. She ground her teeth, refusing to yield, to fall back into the haunting void of shadows. Something snapped within her, a fierce cry of unyielding strength, and she sprinted forward. I will not be trapped by you. She roared, willing every ounce of her being into the words. With Jake beside her, they burst into the illuminated circle of light. As they crossed the threshold, an explosion of brilliance swallowed the shadows whole, an eruption of clarity that banished the darkness from their minds. They fell to their knees in the warm glow, gasping for air. The oppressive weight of shadows lifted as they looked at each other, disbelief flooding their hearts. Did we? Jake gasped, his voice tinged with hope as he glanced around. The clearing was no longer a prison, instead, it radiated freedom. Yes, we did. Sarah breathed, her heartbeat steadying. Surrounded by shifting trees and radiant sparks of light, they gazed at the fading darkness, witnessing shadows retreating, howling as they vanished into the whispers of the night. But as the last remnants of shadows slipped away, an echo of that dark laughter whispered through the trees, chilling them to the bone. You think you've escaped? This is just the beginning. Terror coursed through her veins once more. What does it mean? She whispered, heart pounding. Would the darkness linger? Would it follow them into this new light? Jake gripped her hand tighter, his fingers warm, and that connection brought a sense of calm. Whatever it means, he said with a fierce glint of determination, we'll face it together. They shared a moment, the weight of their journey settling between them. Sarah's heart swelled, the shadows would not claim them today. No more deception, no more horror. As the first rays of dawn pierced through the canopy above, washing everything in a golden hue, they cast their eyes to the horizon. It felt like a promise, a new beginning, even in the aftermath of trembling uncertainty. They had reclaimed their lives together, their bond stronger than any darkness that sought to bind them. With one last glance back at the fading remnants of despair, they turned toward the dawn, excited and terrified, yet hopeful. The whispers might always linger, urging her to remember, but she wouldn't be defined by fear. They had won today, but the real fight for their freedom had only just begun. Let us go home, Sarah said, her voice steady. And hand in hand, they stepped into the unknown with bravery and hope, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Now that you've seen Sarah and Jake's intense and harrowing journey come to a close, you need to subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss more exclusive stories like this one.
Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and let us know just how much you enjoyed this thrilling ride. And don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice matters. This is the moment to show your support and help us grow. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to help spread the word.